Hello, Flame community. This is Jeff Kyle with the Flame Learning Channel. Markers have seen some improvements and enhancements in the Flame 2027 release to help pave the way for the brand new annotation feature. In this video, we'll be covering what's changed and what's new with markers. Adding markers to a timeline remains unchanged from legacy versions of Flame. We can either use the / keyboard shortcut for a regular marker that lives on the time bar, or the Shift / shortcut for a segment marker that lives on a segment on the track that is currently in focus. And that's Shift Right Alt with Smoke Classic keyboard shortcuts to create a regular marker, and Shift Right Control to create a segment marker. Alternatively, we can use this marker button and this corresponding dropdown to specify even more about how the marker will be added to the timeline. While this workflow is unchanged, how the markers are organized has changed just a bit. Whereas we used to have a dedicated markers panel, markers are now added to the Explorer, and we can quickly get there using the same keyboard shortcut, Ctrl+5. Here, we have some familiar marker organization controls with a number of options to adjust, delete, or manage our markers. But we now have some additional filtering options to filter down our marker list based on a specific track, based on a color, or based on the marker type. We also have the ability to show markers that have annotations, but we'll be going into more detail about annotations in the next video. We have a new column here all the way to the right, creation date, so this marker list can be sorted based on when the marker was made. Since this Markers tab lives in the Explorer, we can access them outside of the timeline environment. Here in the Effects environment, you'll see our marker button here in the center of the screen with our familiar marker creation controls. Just as a note, we can only create a marker when we're viewing the current segment. If we happen to be viewing another track via a context view, we won't be able to create a marker. Since we have access to the Explorer, we have access to the Markers tab here to manage the markers for the whole sequence. It's also worth noting that we have a visual representation of the markers here in the time bar with icons matching the marker's color, as well as a shaded duration section of the time bar to represent a marker that spans more than a single frame. And if we don't want to see them, here in this Options dropdown under Markers, we can hide all markers or just turn off the duration view. Markers are also accessible and newly improved inside of the Batch and Batch Effects environment as well. For starters, markers are sent to batch groups when we perform a sequence publish or when we use the Create Batch Group workflow in Conform or with the contextual menu in the timeline. The only catch here is that only segment markers associated with the segment that has been sent to batch will be included. Any regular markers on the time bar will not be sent to batch. Now that we can have markers in batch, we have a few new markers preferences. Our preferences in User and Timeline are unchanged, and this section is where we control the default marker and segment marker name and comment. But over here under System and Batch Effects, we have new settings to control the default node marker name and comment. Back in Batch, we can see our now very familiar marker button right where we would expect it, but note there is only one type of marker here in Batch. It's also important to note that markers are explicitly associated with a node, not with the batch group as a whole, and not just with a clip node. For example, the markers that came in with this batch group here are associated with the clip node here. If I pull out another node and select that one, we can see the markers are not visible with this node selected, but are visible again when I switch back to the clip node. If I go to this node here, I can use the marker button to add a marker, and now I've made a marker associated with this node, which is separate from the markers on the clip node. Here in this Options dropdown, we have a few controls for marker visibility, some overall controls for showing and hiding the markers and showing the duration, just like we had in the Effects environment. But here in Batch, we have this extra dropdown for context. Current node shows us the markers from the most recently selected node, even if we aren't selecting that node. If we pay special attention to the outline around a node, we'll see that when a node is selected, it has a solid yellow line around it. And when we select a clip node after selecting that first node, the solid yellow line turns into a dotted gray line, indicating that node is the current node. With this context setting selected, we'll see the markers on that node until we select a different node. This works the same way for current clip node, except it's a slightly different color for clip nodes. When the clip node is selected, it still has that solid yellow line around it just like any node, but when we select a node after selecting that clip node, the solid yellow line turns into a dotted light blue line, indicating that that is the current clip node for our selection. The last context option allows us to set a specific context to see the markers of that node, regardless of our selection. And finally, if we're looking to see and use markers inside of batch effects, we have a special batch effects specific marker option. If we have segment markers on the batch effects segment or regular markers in the sequence, we'll be able to see either set of markers when we switch from batch effects level to sequence level. Workflow enhancers like this and many of the other marker enhancements are laying the groundwork for the brand new annotations workflow, which we'll be covering in our next video. If you like these videos and you're finding them helpful, please subscribe to the Flame Learning channel and click the bell to stay notified about new content. Feel free to comment any questions or suggestions below. Until next time, thanks a bunch for watching.